Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Tech Beats Unplugged, the podcast where we groove into the latest tech trends and vibe with the flow of cloud possibilities. I'm your host, 𝐒⍫ aka Cloud Dude, and I'm pumped to be here with y'all. Today is the second and last part of our exciting open source debate after part 1, which was dope. Back with us, special guest Erik Benner, VP of Enterprise Transformation at Mythics, who authored several books, used Red Hat, sold Red Hat over the years, but also helped customers manage their licenses and migrate to other distros. In part 1, we delved into the fundamentals of Linux distributions, the RHEL DownStream, UpStream, Freeloaders, GPL, up to Red Hat's recent mischief, the whole drama. This time, we'll explore how the open source community and rebuilders are coping with Red Hat's decision to close their source, and what it means for the future of enterprise Linux. Erik, welcome back, and glad you survived episode 1.
Thanks for having me. It's good that I survived episode 1 as well.
How are you doing?
Oh, I'm fine this evening.
That's great. It's great. For those who haven't listened to part 1 yet, Erik did a brilliant job explaining confusing concepts behind Linux distribution and how it works with simple words and analogies. So, ready for part 2, my friend?
Let's get going.
Good. Let's do it. All right. First, I would like to start with the response from enterprise Linux rebuilders, or enhancers, as you call them. Nobody calls them freeloaders anymore. And their workaround to continue providing bug-for-bug rebuilds of Red Hat Enterprise Linux. Lately, I did hear a few workarounds already, like Rocky Linux leveraging UBI, universal base images, which are container images based on RHEL, or Alma going for binary compatible route, or ABI. Could you talk a bit about these workarounds?
Yeah, those are both workarounds that they've looked at. The major thing that Alma's trying to do with theirs is give you mostly a binary compatible model using Red Hat's officially published way of doing that. You're not one-for-one close to the distribution, but for the most part, it'll let you run a lot of your containers in an environment that is similar to Red Hat. And for some people, that works out really well. Now, what Rocky is doing is a little different. They've talked about using UBI. They've also talked about going to cloud providers and buying Red Hat accounts from cloud providers and then downloading the source code from there. They stirred up a lot of things, talking about a couple of options in one of their blog posts. UBI being one of them. The other one is just downloading through cloud providers. But the intent behind Rocky was, and it still is, and we'll talk more about that, to have a truly one-for-one compatible, as identical as you can make it distribution. And that's the same approach that Oracle is looking at doing with their distribution, and their packaging for it is, again, to be 100% or as close as you can be 100% to Red Hat. So if it runs on Red Hat, it's going to run with Oracle. It's going to be the same commands. It's going to be the same package version numbers. And then you have SUSE also entered into the mix out of all this. They publicly announced that they were actually going to create a Red Hat distro of their own as a clone. And their goal was to make it free, just like Oracle is free and Rocky is free, but also as a bridge for their SUSE customers that still need Red Hat compatibility for certain things. And their approach was they're just going to announce it. They didn't announce how they were going to do that. And that actually came out on a little bit later on how these guys are going to get to that approach. Well, those are kind of the approaches that the major clones of Red Hat were approaching, how they were going to get to that compatibility that users really need and demand.
I'm curious about one thing, though, regarding Rocky Linux, for example. What if tomorrow Red Hat would just decide to ban them or make it for them impossible to use UBI images or use cloud providers and pay-per-use public cloud instances? Can they log that kind of workaround from Rocky?
They could, but the reality is that's just a shortcut. Because if you really want to build something identical to Red Hat, all you have to do is see the versions in the RPMs that you install. So if I see that I'm running, some software version 1.2.3.4, and I want to build an identical version of that software, I go to whoever created that software, whatever open source project. Remember we talked before, none of this is built exclusively by any one company or any one organization. So I go to the company that built that software and I go download the source code for version 1.2.3.4. And now I have that source code. I don't even have to download it from Red Hat. Where it was easier to do with Red Hat is they put all that source code for that version, 8.4, 8.5, 8.6 in one GitHub, and you could download it all easily. And you didn't have to do all the time and expense of tracking down every individual package. But you still have that capability once you know that, if it's kernel, 4.15.232, you go get the source for 4.15.232, and you have the exact, basically, version that Red Hat has at that point. It's just built and signed by a different company, and it just takes more work to go get that version. So even if they completely shut it down, they could do that. Now, if Red Hat said, hey, as a part of the Red Hat user, you can't even disclose what version of iPerf you're using, that becomes a whole other problem when it comes to analyzing security and security vulnerabilities and the security ecosystem and ISV ecosystem, because if they say you can't tell what version of the kernel you're running, ISVs are not going to be able to support you because they can't find out. So I can't imagine Red Hat would shut that down either, because it's just too complicated for them to tell people you can't even say what version of individual packages that you're using.
Interesting.
So there's workarounds to it, and it's going to slow things down a little bit, but not as much as you think, in order to maintain that compatibility, I think.
Interesting. So technically they don't even need to forward the source from the DNF to their Git repo. They can just check the version and then go back to the source of that package, like whoever maintains that project or that tool, and create RPMs out of it.
Yeah, you could easily do that. It made it from where you had everything already bundled up for you, where it was easy to do that research, to now you might have to go research, 10,000 packages.
Got it.
And that's a little hard for any one company to go research 10,000 packages every day. But a lot of that could be automated as well. And that's another way of doing it, if they completely shut down where they don't even give source RPMs to customers that use it.
Got it.
And then they would have other issues with all the different software licenses out there, not just the GPL, but all the other software licenses out there that are around open source technology.
All right. So I know that Amazon Linux 2 is not really based on Red Hat Enterprise Linux, but based on multiple versions of Fedora and CentOS 9. And it's not even compatible. Like the new version of Amazon Linux, not even compatible with extra package EPEL. So I think that one is out of the picture. But for Alma Linux, going binary compatible, do you think it's do you think it's sustainable as a strategy?
Oh, to both of those. As far as what Alma is doing and the path they're going, it's no longer going to be as close to Red Hat as it could be. It'll still be mostly compatible, but for a lot of more complex software, it's not going to be the same level of compatibility that it really could be for Alma. But they're also playing nicer with Red Hat. And I have to admit, Oracle and Rocky and SUSE are not playing as nice with Red Hat. They're trying to push the community to keep it free and open. Alma's kind of not so much right now, but we'll see about what happens with change. One thing you have to understand too is that Alma is a 501c, community-driven, community-funded. They don't have the pockets that Rocky has with CIQ, that Oracle Linux has with Oracle, that SUSE's distribution, their clone, if you would, of Red Hat be backed by SUSE. So Alma doesn't quite have the same resources behind it. So it's a little harder for them to actively compete. And the beauty with this is we're talking operating systems and distributions that have a lot of functionality, and there's pros and cons to all of them. So it's not that really, and when it comes to Alma and SUSE and Oracle and Rocky, there's pros and cons to all of them on how they operate and what they're planning on doing that make it where the users can kind of pick the right thing for what they're trying to do. Amazon Linux is a little different. One of the nice things with Oracle Linux is you can download it and you can run it in pretty much any cloud provider you want. Same thing with SUSE, same thing with Rocky, same thing with Alma. Amazon Linux is pretty much you're only running it in Amazon. The challenge there for a lot of organizations is organizations are going to multi-cloud. And to have one operating system on one cloud provider and then have to have another operating system for your on-prem, it makes it a lot more difficult to build multi-cloud projects. And that becomes kind of a limitation with Amazon Linux, is that it's pretty much only available in AWS. It's also not as standards-based. And I think that's an important thing to the conversation. It's not really an enterprise Linux. At that point, it's more of an Amazon Linux. So it's kind of outside of that equation. Things that run on Red Hat may or may not run on Amazon. Where with Oracle and 𝐎𝐫𝐚𝐜 and Rocky, it will. And with Alma, it usually will. And until recently, Red Hat's been the standard. And that's, of course, changing right now as well.
I see. Well, Amazon Linux they say it's optimized for Amazon platform anyway. So I would guess why it's interesting to run it in Amazon, but you lose the ability to run it anywhere else. So yeah, it makes sense. Could you even download it and run it on your laptop, or do they have binaries?
I don't think at this point Amazon lets you do that.
I see. All right, now, showtime. As it's a crazy scenario here, I'm going to try to be very creative. So bear with me and please don't laugh, okay? Here's the big bang question for you. Is Oracle the new Batman of open source, Linux-wise?
Great question.
I'll explain why I chose Batman.
Yeah, explain why it's Batman, because
yes.
I'm thinking of a answer to that.
All right, okay, I'll say it then. So I chose Batman because, according to DC Comics, most of the time Batman is the one who saves the day, but not really seen as like the hero, or maybe the unsung hero. So he gets the job done and saves the day, but you got half of the city not liking the persona, right? So that's why I call it Batman of open source, Linux wise. But yeah, well, tell me if is Oracle going to save the day this time?
Oracle has always been putting a huge amount of effort into Linux. And a lot of people don't realize, even open source in general, how much Oracle puts in. A lot of Linux that we run today on Red Hat or 𝐎𝐫𝐴 or Debian, for that matter, Fedora, comes from Oracle. So they've been involved in this a long time, put a lot of resource into it for a long time. I don't think Batman is really what they are. I really think we're looking more of a Justice League moment. That we're not looking at Batman where it's a single person trying to make the world a better place. I think we're really looking at a Justice League moment where you have a Batman and a Superman and a Wonder Woman and a Green Lantern, kind of getting together to save the day. And I think that's what you're actually seeing the industry do right now, is to do that.
Okay, so let's say it's not Batman, but it's more a Justice League. Right. But I would like to describe one member of this Justice League, which is Oracle. Could you tell me about the role of Oracle and the contributions they had to the open source community, especially for the Enterprise Linux project since 2006, and the commitment to free source code, binaries, updates? Could you tell me more about this?
Yeah, I know. And the word free in Oracle, a lot of people don't know how to handle that very well.
You bet. Yes.
But the open source community in Oracle is very different than other parts of Oracle. Just like the cloud component in Oracle operates very differently than other parts of Oracle. And what you've had with Oracle Linux is you have to understand how and why Oracle founded it. And they've talked about it. They were getting Linux from another vendor. They were tired of patches taking a long time to get out there. They were tired of issues where they would find a fix and it would just sit and sit and sit and never make it in, and they wanted to fix the patch now. So they kind of started spinning off Oracle Linux to really address problems they were getting with a vendor onto it. And they were a huge customer of that vendor until this happened. And they started looking at what they were doing with Linux and what they can improve Linux for, specifically for the enterprise workloads, and how could they make it faster? How could they make it more secure? How could they put more functionality into it than the other vendor was putting in? And that, I think, is what really started Oracle Linux and really starting to take off, where a lot of my enterprise customers use Oracle Linux for very specific workloads out there. And one of the things Oracle has is a choice of kernels. If you're running Red Hat, you are stuck with Red Hat's kernel. And it could be an old kernel sometimes. It could You could have a system that's a, enterprise Linux 7 system, and you're stuck on a version 3 Linux kernel. And there's much newer kernels out there. There's version 5, version 6 kernels out there already. But if you're on enterprise Linux 7, you're stuck on a version 3. If you're 8, you're stuck on a version 4. If you're 9, okay, you're on a version 5. But you're on a particular tree of 5, and you don't get some of the new stuff. And Oracle has what they call UEK kernel, which is another kernel, another engine of the car.
About that, by the way, I would like to know, because a lot of people maybe never heard about UEK, aka Unbreakable Linux. That's what it means. I would like to know, can you describe the difference between the distribution and UEK? Apparently UEK is the kernel. What's so special about UEK, and what makes it very interesting in this case, compared to what Red Hat, for example, has?
Right. So UEK is just the kernel. It's just the engine of the distribution. The distribution is still Oracle Linux. They rebranded from Oracle Enterprise Linux several years ago. And UEK stands for Unbreakable Enterprise Kernel, and that's Oracle's marketing terminology for it. It's a much more modern, much more recent kernel than what you would get with the standard enterprise distribution. And it has a lot of enhancements. So with UEK, if I decide to take an enterprise Linux 7 system, I can install UEK on it, and I get it like a version 5 kernel instead of the version 3 that I would normally get if I'm on Red Hat 7.9. I'm still on the version 3 kernel. With UEK, I can get a version 5 kernel, maybe even a newer version. And the advantages of the newer kernel with UEK is I'm going to get more device driver support built into the kernel. So maybe I'm trying to install this on a new server, but I want to install an OS, and now the network cards don't work. Well, if I use UEK, there's a better chance of it working out of the box, and I don't have to go to custom rebuilding kernels to put in custom device drivers. UEK also has a lot of optimizations to it, especially around networking and storage, which are really, really, really important for Oracle's workloads, right? For database workloads. And those advantages of UEK for storage performance are an advantage regardless of what database you have. If you're running Oracle or MySQL or Postgres, you get all the same advantages where you can get more storage throughput on the system. You get lower latency on storage, which means not only can I get more faster storage, but the time to get a packet of data is even less than with a standard older kernel behind it. And those translate to real performance advantages. And I've had customers of mine that simply by taking a system, I've had customers that have Red Hat, 7.9, and they moved to Oracle Linux 7.9, but then they moved to UEK, and they're seeing a 25% improvement in their Splunk servers because UEK has all these optimizations in the kernel that make the storage faster and the networking faster and some other enhancements that just makes it run faster. And to the customer, it was like, hey, we're running Splunk. We had a contract. We went to Oracle Linux to save a lot of money over Red Hat. But then it's like our Splunk servers got 25% faster just by changing the kernel. It's on the exact same hardware. So it's not like they upgraded the hardware. It's on the exact same storage arrays. They didn't upgrade the storage arrays. What they got was just better performance with the UEK kernel. The nice thing with UEK is I can take a system and put UEK on it. And if I want to go back to the Red Hat compatible kernel, maybe you have some security software that's very specifically written for the older version 3 or version 4 kernel that you're running, and you need to back down to the Red Hat kernel, the compatible kernel. You simply reboot the box, and now you're on the Red Hat kernel. Regardless of what kernel you pick in the distribution with Oracle, whether it's UEK or just the standard Red Hat compatible kernel, everything else is identical. All the user space libraries are identical. All the other bits and pieces that come with the OS, the distribution, are identical. But with the UEK, you get better performance, you get better support. You get some other enhancements with UEK for troubleshooting with a technology like dtrace. You get some enhancements with UEK for file system. You can use ButterFS, which is an awesome file system that's similar to ZFS, and that the file system and the volume manager are built in. They're the same thing. And you can do some really cool things with ButterFS because of that. So a cool thing I'll do with ButterFS, if you have ButterFS as your boot file system and you do a DNF upgrade, DNF will automatically create a snapshot of your drives that are ButterFS and then install. So if I want to fall back, I just restore the snapshot and I boot back to the pre-patched system. So there's a lot of cool things you get with UEK outside of the performance. But everything else in the distro is identical. other than just those enhancements you get with 𝐸𝐸𝐾.
Help me understand better the difference between the kernel and the distribution. Let's say you have Red Hat 7. You had that kernel originally, and you want to move to 𝐸𝐸𝐾. What does change when you move to a 𝐸𝐸𝐾? For example, it's an older version, right? But you'd have like version 7 of a 𝐸𝐸𝐾. Is the version of the RPM or the packages, are these versions different? Or when you say all the rest is the same, is it an upgrade for the whole operating system? What is upgraded?
No.
You know, what would you upgrade?
No, the kernel's just the kernel. So things like Apache will be the same. Things like VI will be the same version. Perl will be the same version. All the other applications, Perl, Python, all the commands that come from like the GNU project, everything's the same. The only thing that really changes is the actual kernel, which is the engine.
Okay, so it's more the internal features of the kernel that are enhanced. We're not talking about the user space. We're not
just
like changing the YUM repo for that OS. Same YUM
No,
repo.
same YUM repos.
There you go.
Same DNF repos.
There you go.
Same DNF commands. Everything is identical, other than with a newer kernel, you get a lot of cooler things. So you can do better disk performance, better network performance. You get device drivers over there. You get WireGuard built into the kernel with newer versions of 𝐸𝐸𝐾, which is your VPN technology, which has some really cool things you can do with it that you don't get in the older kernel that Red Hat ships. And the big thing is you have that choice, that I can decide to stay on Enterprise Linux 7 on an older version, but I can go to a 𝐸𝐸𝐾 6 and get a much more modern kernel that enables things like WireGuard, enables things with device drivers and better NVMe support and better performance and all this other stuff to the system. So those are the things that you kind of get with it when you go to the newer version of 𝐸𝐸𝐾. And you have the choice.
So the user space stays the same, or you're just enhancing the internal part of the operating system, especially the ones that are interacting with the hardware, for example. That's what's enhanced
Exactly.
most of the time in the kernel.
Exactly. You're getting the user space applications and all those components stay the same, but you're getting enhancements to the kernel that give you more functionality, more features. And then you just get the better performance. It's like a free upgrade. Like I said, I had a customer did all their Splunk servers with 𝐸𝐸𝐾, and it was a 25% performance increase because of how Splunk works. And that was a big thing to them, you know. I've done some basic benchmarks using like Sysbench and exact same hardware. And I'll go from 37 megabits per second to 44 megabits per second with no tuning. I just swapped out the kernel. And I got just some instant performance increase there. But you also get lower latency. So not only am I getting the data faster, I'm also getting lower latency with the data, which means I'm getting the little bits and pieces even faster than before. So I get more bandwidth, which is amount of data I can push through. But I also get lower latency, which is faster, which means the data moves faster. And again, pick the right tool for the right job. And when you can do that with 𝐸𝐸𝐾, it's like a free upgrade before you add in all the other bonus bits to it.
Damn, it's like we're talking about Too Fast and Furious here. It's like we're talking about Vin Diesel's car, where they just put a lot of nitro and...
Yeah, I mean, you got an old, Yugo, with an Enterprise Linux 7 system that's an old Yugo, a little 3-cylinder engine or whatever, and you want to go fast, but you still want to stay with the Yugo. You can drop in 𝐸𝐸𝐾 there, and now you're in the 8-cylinder turbocharged engine. The Yugo still looks like a Yugo. You still have a Yugo transmission and Yugo suspension, but you get a much bigger engine that lets you do a lot of things faster. And that's really what you get when you go to 𝐸𝐸𝐾. But everything else is identical. It's the same car. It just has a bigger, faster engine. I could stick you on a system with a 𝐸𝐸𝐾 and you'll never know. Unless you're like the 2 or 3% of software out there that really cares about the kernel version. And pretty much every time I've seen that, it's been more often than not security software, because the APIs to a version 5 kernel are different than the API calls to a version 3 kernel, to simplify it.
I see. That's also free to use.
Yes.
So that's why I realize it's a whole ecosystem.
That's also free.
It's not just the operating system. It's like...
Right. It's the trailer, right? You have an F-150. You got to do enterprise work with it. Enterprise work is going to be virtualization. It's going to be management. It's going to be automation. Red Hat, if you want automation, you have to pay for it. With Oracle, it's built into the distro. It's just you bolt it on. They open up this repo and do my install. If I want a full function virtualization stack, I'm tired of paying for VMware. With Red Hat, you can pay for Red Hat's virtualization, and it's an upcharge. Or you can go buy VMware, and that's an upcharge. Or you can use Oracle Linux Virtualization Manager, which is just overt. It's identical to overt. It's just Oracle has taken a point in time freeze of the release of overt. They say, we're going to support this version for a while. And then 6 months later, there's an upgrade. There's an upgrade cycle to it. And you get all the functionality of overt. They just rebrand it Oracle Linux Virtualization Manager because it's their build and they support it. And the thing with support from Oracle is all of Oracle's free. It's just if you want support, you pay for support. And you pay one fee for support. They call it Premier Support. And you...
Before we talk about support, because we're going to talk about support as well. But tell me about something that is very specific to Oracle Linux that none of the other EL clones or even Red Hat has. Like me, I have my favorite is 𝐫𝐸, but just let me know if there's anything else. Like, I don't want to spoil anything, so I'll let you describe those features that are really specific to Oracle Linux. Go ahead.
So 𝐫𝐸 is a feature of Oracle Linux support. It's not a software, it's a service that Oracle bundles in when you buy Oracle support. You get 𝐫𝐸, and 𝐫𝐸 is really cool. That allows me to safely and reliably patch the kernel while it's running with no downtime. But 𝐫𝐸 isn't unique to Oracle Linux. If you're running an OCI, you can 𝐫𝐸 other systems. I can 𝐫𝐸 a Red Hat kernel. I could take Red Hat and use 𝐫𝐸 on it. I just have to either be running it in OCI, or I have to have an Oracle Linux subscription to get the service, to get the special packages that allow you to do it. And 𝐫𝐸 works for other operating systems, but it's most known for being an Oracle feature. It's not open source, it's a service. A lot of that is to build a splice, takes a lot of time and effort. So what Oracle is selling with 𝐫𝐸 is the service to build the splices. They're not selling the software, they're selling the service to build it. And that's mostly a unique thing to Oracle Linux. Oracle Linux.
Okay.
Yeah.
You either use it on-prem and you'd have to have support paid for it, or in OCI, Oracle Cloud, where you don't have to pay for it. It's just a built-in service.
Right.
It's part of the deal, right? There are no fees, right?
In Oracle Cloud, Oracle Linux Premier Support's included with your subscription to Oracle Cloud for your systems running on OCI.
So anytime I spin a VM with Oracle Linux, it's included?
Yes.
Okay.
Now, 𝐫𝐸 has some cool things you can do with it. It not only lets you patch the kernel running real time without any downtime, it also has what's called known exploit detection. And that is the ability for certain privileged escalation vulnerabilities, which is Oracle's word. It's a long thing for basically if you're going to try to hack your system and get root, is simplifying it. If you have a system that's already been patched with 𝐫𝐸 and then somebody tries to exploit that vulnerability against it, and it's an exploit that the system already knows about, it'll report that somebody tried to attack the system. It basically turns every one of your systems that are running 𝐫𝐸 into a simplified intrusion detection system for people attacking your kernel trying to get root access. And I'm simplifying this for people.
Yeah, it's like an EDR or something.
Yeah, but the cool thing is most people, when they try to attack a system, the process of, I'm what's called a bad actor, which is the technical term now for a hacker. And I want to get into your data and I want to hack your system. What I'm going to do is I'm not just going to attack your system. I'm going to get into your environment. Sometimes I'm going to get a job for one of your contractors, and I'm going to get in as an employee for one of your contractors, or for you for that matter. And once I have access for a legitimate thing, maybe I'm as a DBA, but I don't have root access, but I can log into the OS. And then I'm going to, in a non-production environment, I'm going to try to use some attacks trying to see what ones work in your environment. And when I find one that works, I pretty much know if it works in dev, it's going to work in production, because you always patch dev before you patch production. And I could be in there doing these attacks maybe one a month, right? I might spend 2 minutes one day to do one attack to see if you're vulnerable to it. And then once I know an attack that you're vulnerable to, then I'm going to plan my attack where I'm going to go to the production system. I'm going to leverage that attack and I'm going to exfiltrate. I'm going to copy whatever data I'm trying to steal out of your system. When you have 𝐫𝐸 and you set up everything for known exploit, when the bad actors attack your dev systems, known exploit detection is going off saying, hey, this guy just tried to use this CVE, this known vulnerability against your kernel. It was just attacked on this machine at this time and this date. And it was this CVE that the system was attacked against. And now you have people go, oh, we just saw attacks against our dev system, and it happened at 2:03 p.m. on Saturday afternoon. Well, who was logged in the system? Oh, it was Bubba Jr. was the only person logged in at 2:03 p.m., and now he's trying to do data discovery to do a major attack. Let's take whatever our procedures are to secure the environment from Bubba Jr. Maybe it's not Bubba Jr. Maybe his account's been hacked, right? You can't really say it's him personally because his account could have been compromised. But you know his account's being used for this attack, and then depending on your organization, they're going to do different things. That's a cool thing that's very unique to what Oracle does with 𝐤𝐫𝐴.
Nice. So it does like online patching without rebooting, and also threat detection.
Yep.
That's slick.
Well, I have people I know that just as a point of pride, they have systems that have 5-6 year uptime.
Wow.
With 𝐤𝐫𝐴, just as a point of pride.
Crazy.
And that's a cool thing. And that's a uniquely Oracle thing. But I think when it comes to Linux, the more uniquely Oracle thing is they don't nickel and dime you for all these other things. If I want HA clustering with Core Sync and Pacemaker, which is a system that allows me to cluster servers, Oracle doesn't charge you extra for it. You know, somebody else might charge you extra for that technology. You get automation like with Ansible, no additional cost. You get technology for security. If you pay for support with 𝐤𝐫𝐴, it's a service. But you also get a more modern kernel at no additional cost. And they get backporting, which is another cool thing where if I'm running 8.7 and I have a security patch, Oracle doesn't make me upgrade to 8.9 to get the patch. They'll actually give me the patch for 8.7 if it's a critical patch. There's some rules around it. And I've had customers that, you know, they are very specific. They're running, let's say, 8.7, and they have this system deployed to 600 servers across the globe. And they have a security patch for 8.7, and they can't upgrade their 600 servers to 8.9 in order to get the patch. And backporting allows them to get that patch for 8.7 so they can patch their 600 servers spread across the globe.
Nice.
And not have to upgrade every server to 8.9 to do it. And that's a huge thing that you get when you pay for support. So there's some other cool things that's more enterprise. But then if you look at...
Is it not available for Red Hat as well?
Not like that. No, not that I've seen.
Okay.
But then you have other distributions like CIQ that does Rocky Linux, and they have a little bit different policy. They tend to have a lot of their stuff based more on like HPC and developer technologies. So when you buy into their ecosystem, you get Rocky Linux and you can pay for support. But then you can do some really cool things with Mountain, which is their lifecycle management software, or Ascender, which is their automation package for primarily used in like HPC environments. And they have a lot of other technology really focused in the HPC space with theirs, like Fuzzball, which is a cool thing as well. Again, it's another high performance computing HPC technology. So they start off with a identical Red Hat copy, but where Oracle enhances it traditionally for a lot of this enterprise stuff, Rocky enhances theirs a lot for HPC, high performance computing, where that's an area that they actually do a better job than, you know, Red Hat does. So that's one of the beauties of having these clones of Red Hat is you can have different manufacturers of these clones kind of tweak their whole ecosystem around a very specific area.
Yeah, or very specific techno.
Yeah.
Because it's their technology. We're talking about Rocky that's like behind HPC.
Right. Very HPC centric. But then you have Oracle that's very enterprise centric. You have Red Hat that's kind of general purpose. And then they have different models to pay for support between all these vendors as well. So you can pay for support if you want, and they have different models on how you pay for support. You know, like Oracle Linux, there's no license keys.
Follow-up question. Speaking for SMEs, #little guys. You know, like just I want to reassure everyone here, the audience. Should I sell my kidney for Oracle Linux support?
Well, first of all, if you want to sell your kidney, go buy Red Hat.
Okay, so the answer is no.
I mean, that's really selling your kidney, because I'll give you an example. Oracle, I mean, I do this. I've done this price matrix for years, right? And again, you pick the right tool for the right job, right? And so sometimes Red Hat's the right tool. You know, you need a certain level of compatibility. You're running certain proprietary software, and the only choice that vendor gives you is to run on Red Hat. And absolutely go buy Red Hat. You should have that choice, right? You shouldn't be locked in to buy only one distro. So, but when you look at cost, things get really, really interesting. So Oracle's model is Oracle Linux is free to download, free to use, and free to distribute. So you get generally most of the patches for free. 𝐤𝐫𝐴 is a service. It's a different beast for 𝐤𝐫𝐴. But you get the other pieces for free. So if you just want to play with Oracle Linux and you want to play with things like Core Sync and HA Proxy, and you want to play with all these other technologies, great, use them for free. There's no cost. You can run it at home. You can run it in production. You just can't pick up the phone and call Oracle. But you can download and use it in production for free, which again is very different than what the story people are used to hearing. When it comes to paying for support, they're very different models. Oracle pretty much has Premier support, which you get everything 24/7, 365. All your systems with Premier support get that service level, 24/7, 365, follow the sun support. Red Hat, you can pick. They have different tiers of support. Well, some systems can be 24/7, some can be business hours, some can be only online. But then you look at the price difference. Oracle gives you single price for a physical server. You can run as many VMs on that server with everything that's included with Enterprise Linux from Oracle in that one price. And their list price is less than Red Hat's list price for what they call their data center version. So it just gives you the operating system. And already Oracle support price is less than data center for Red Hat. And then you take the Red Hat and you add in Ansible, and you add in clustering, and you add in system management, and you add in the developer tools. So you start adding things in, it gets more and more expensive. Oh, you want virtualization. So now you got to go add that in, and it gets more expensive. And suddenly the big bill is really the Red Hat bill. And that's actually where you're selling your kidney to go buy Red Hat.
Damn.
Because Oracle price doesn't change at all. And that's the thing that drives a lot of my customers that I have that are on Red Hat that have workloads like Splunk or a lot of in-house developed applications that they will use Oracle Linux for free in their non-prod environments, and they'll pay just for their prod environments and save a huge amount of money. And all the same technology is there for them to use. But if you from a price aspect, you take Red Hat example, a data center is $4,000 a year. You add on their resilient storage, which is Gluster, that's another $2,500 a year. You add on HA, which is their Core Sync pacemaker, that's like another $1,200 a year. You add on Smart Management, which is another $1,200 a year. You get unlimited guest for guest OSs, that's another like $700 a year. You add on Ansible for 100 targets, that's like $14,000 a year. Wow. It adds up really quick. Where Oracle, it's like $13.99 and you get all that built in for free. So it's a huge cost difference.
I'm sorry, but it's almost hard to believe.
Yeah, and it's a huge price difference. But Oracle is like $13.99 for everything. In Red Hat for data centers, $39.99 when I last looked up the prices. So already Oracle's half the price. So you're really not selling a kidney.
Exactly. It's a different game.
It's very, but this is the open source teams like the cloud team at Oracle. They operate very differently than what a lot of people are used to. Because the cloud team, I see the same thing when I do OCI and somebody compares their Amazon bill. It's something like, wait a second, OCI is going to save me $120,000 a month. And you're like, yeah. They're like, but it's Oracle. I'm like, it's a different Oracle than what you're used to. Oracle is changing as a company, and cloud is pushing that, and the market changing is pushing that. But the Linux team has always been this way. They've always sold with a different model. I think part of it is when Oracle built Enterprise Linux, their idea was we need something we could run our enterprise on. So we're going to build all this functionality and we're going to support it. And just by us building and supporting it as an in-house project, we save money. And then somebody said, hey, look, if you're building this enterprise in-house project and you're saving all this money in-house, what if we sold it for just a little bit of money and customers can now save that same amount of money? And they're like, well, our development cost is pretty much for in-house use anyway. So I think it made a lot of sense. And I suspect that's the genesis of why they ended up doing it so cheap.
Sure.
Because they were already doing this to move off of what they were using because they were getting things like kernel patches quickly.
Yeah, they didn't have to wait for Red Hat to merge.
6 months, I've seen kernel patches where Oracle's come out with that kernel patch and literally 3 months later, Red Hat comes out with that same kernel patch. And the Oracle system has been patched for 3 months. And yeah, sometimes Red Hat might beat Oracle by a couple days, but sometimes Oracle will beat Red Hat by months, and it varies from patch to patch.
But you can still use it in production.
Yeah,
for free.
For free. You don't get
if you don't need support.
Yeah, if you don't want to pick up support, you don't want 𝐾Splice, you can still use it for free. And I run it on Raspberry Pis. I run my entire home lab is for the most part Oracle Linux. I run Overt on my home lab. I don't pay a penny. Then it doesn't matter who you are. It's free. Now if you want to pick up support, you got to pay for support, but the support's still cheaper in Red Hat. So there's a huge cost savings there. It's a very different Oracle.
Cool.
And the beauty with Linux is it's supposed to give you that flexibility. Companies aren't competing on that core. They're competing on the extra stuff, right? Which is kind of like Oracle focuses on the enterprise. Rocky tends to focus on the HPC. Those two markets don't overlap much. So they're able to do some cool things together. And you see that camaraderie within the enterprise space outside of one company.
I've noticed. I really noticed him, like, especially since they've been called freeloaders by this entity lately.
It's like,
yes. So that's a reason to for them to actually gather, because apparently they're labeled with the same nickname.
Yeah, and people, it's like Oracle doesn't do open source. I'm like, sure they do. And one of the cool things I do, there's a site called oss.oracle.com, and definitely go to it. They list like every open source project that they're a major behind. So if you want to use like functions for Helm using FN, that's a project that Oracle drives. That's one of their projects that you get. And that's just that list. And one of the things I haven't had the patience for is to keep clicking load more, because you get about 15, 20 clicks and you're still loading more projects.
And again, it's still hard to believe. So when you tell people about that, the amount of contribution
go to the
to
site.
the kernel.
That's why I tell people.
Yes, they would not necessarily believe you until they check. Yeah, it's surprising, to be honest. Like, I'm sorry, but it's, these things are pretty surprising. But I guess you got to get used to it, because
it's very surprising for a lot of people, and I understand why. The open source team is a very different team. But it's not just Oracle that surprises. Like with Red Hat, I've seen things like we had a situation in the community where the Alma team had found a security vulnerability, a CVE, and they submitted it, and Red Hat didn't want to take the patch.
Yeah, you did say that. Yeah.
And the Alma team was like, wait, how are we freeloaders? We have a security patch, right? The patch is a CVE, a security vulnerability. And your response was basically, we don't see value in patching our systems for CVEs, which is paraphrasing, the response.
Absolutely.
And that's something that you just kind of see. And it's like, well, yeah, Red Hat doesn't own open source. They don't own the distro. There's tons of things. And it's not just Oracle. There's Apache. The guys from Rocky, from CIQ, they work with a lot of HPC stuff. They also work with Samba. They're big drivers on that side of it. You have folks at Alma that work on a lot of different projects outside of building the distribution.
True.
It's a community-driven thing, and that's kind of one of the things that hopefully people realize is that Linux isn't a single vendor.
Yeah.
Linux is made by thousands of projects coming together into the distribution to make something you want to run.
True. And speaking of community, probably one of the last topic of the show. Shall we please get candid and predict the future of enterprise Linux? Will we have an Avengers League team up for a new EL standard? What's your take? I know there's something that happened this week, but I'll give you the honor.
Yeah, there's been something that's been in the works for quite some time. It was started long before Red Hat made their change, where it just makes more work for people to make a system that's compatible with Red Hat. And it's been in work quite some time about it, but it just got released the other day. And that's the Open Enterprise Linux Association. And this is a group that is driven by CIQ, which are the folks that do Rocky Linux. It's driven by Oracle and also SUSE. Now think about this. You have Rocky Linux, Oracle Linux, and SUSE getting together, right? So this tells you how serious these companies are about making this work.
That sounds like a backfire for me.
No, it's like the Justice League. I like you say it's Avengers. To me, it's the Justice League, right?
Wow.
You got Oracle with its red cape being Superman. You have SUSE with its green chameleon being the Green Lantern, right? And you got CIQ, which to me kind of has this like Wonder Woman theme in their coloring. And I that's the best I can come up with for CIQ.
Crazy.
Sorry, guys.
Crazy. And it took a few weeks.
Well, it's like I said, this has been in works for a long time. I've kind of had hints of it and some informal conversations about what ifs and how would this work, or how would this be driven in the community, but it was never something that was like, yes, this is going to happen on this date. I think what happened personally is when Red Hat did this and they made the change, that they basically gave a finger to the open source community that we're going to go to basically a closed source distribution. that, and it's their right to do it. It's their business. You just had Terraform, HashiCorp kind of do the same thing with their business license for open source. So BSL.
Yeah,
so
they just went with BSL this week.
Yeah, they went to BSL, and it's difficult to make money in open source. It really is, because you come out with a cool technology, and then with HashiCorp, people are copying their stuff and selling it, competing with HashiCorp, right? And it was stuff that HashiCorp did the development on. This isn't like Linux, where no one company develops Linux, right? Despite what their marketing folks might say, no one company develops a Linux distribution. There are pieces from the Linux Foundation. I always say the GNU folks, which is GNU, because a lot of people overlook the GNU folks. But that's why the GPL is the GNU public license, right? That came from the GNU team.
Yeah, tell me how is it working? You know, like I went to the website. By the way, it's called Open Enterprise Linux Association.
Yep.
Open ELA, so call it wherever you want. Maybe the community will decide how we should call it, but it will ensure stable future for the enterprise Linux ecosystem. That means like you can just get there and get the list of all the RPMs per release.
Right. So
is that how it's going to work?
Right. The intent behind this initial project is they're going to pool the resources between these three companies. I'm sure they're going to have other companies join. I've talked to people from them literally yesterday. And they're like, hey, if you know somebody at Red Hat, let the Red Hat folks know they're welcome to join, right? The idea is this to be an open thing, right? Let everyone that does enterprise Linux build a standard.
Even 𝐶𝐈.
Yeah, 𝐶𝐈 is a founding member. 𝐶𝐈 and Oracle got together to be founding members on something. That should tell you that right there. And Rocky and Rocky too, CIQ with Rocky Linux and their history, because you have to understand, Rocky Linux kind of got started. They were the folks that started CentOS. And then CentOS got acquired by Red Hat. Red Hat took over it. And then they did what they did to CentOS. And now the folks that did that had formed CIQ in the process. And they've formed Rocky Linux, which was kind of what they initially had done with CentOS. So, and I think the initial mandate behind Open ELA is to pool the resources from these three companies and anyone else that wants to join in order to build source code RPMs that they can all share, so they can all build their enhanced version of Red Hat Enterprise Linux. I would not be surprised, because of the players behind it, that if they start pushing out other standards, that this is going to be Red Hat Enterprise Linux. And I've already had some conversations with two ISVs. I mean, this news broke literally yesterday, I think. And I've already had two ISVs that I work with through work that have asked me, because they know I'm plugged into what's going on. As an ISV, what should they do? I talked to a friend of mine that works at HashiCorp, and I'm like, well, you want to support enterprise Linux, and you're kind of confused of, what do I have to have for kernel version or this builder or that version? I'm like, if you set your standard to be Open ELA version 8.4 or greater, that it doesn't matter who builds it. If they build it to that standard, your software is going to be compatible. So it makes it really easy for you to have more options in Linux, because a lot of these ISVs, they don't want to tell you can't use whatever flavor of Linux you want. They don't care, but they need to be able to support it. And like I told a friend of mine from Hashi, who's a product manager over there, that, hey, if you guys followed Open ELA and just said, hey, for this version of this technology, you need to be Open ELA version X, these are the supported versions, then your software is going to work, and you don't care if Oracle builds it or 𝐶𝐈 builds it or CIQ builds it or Alma builds it, because I suspect Alma will be probably getting their source code from here in the near future. It would not surprise me at all. And I would not be surprised if a lot of these ISVs get together and they're like, hey, this is just easier. And it's an open system. It's not controlled by one company. I know some of the things that they require is like all your source code has to be publicly available. You can't put it behind a paywall. That's one of their mandates. Right. And they have other mandates too over at Open ELA that I've talked to folks about, that are going to guarantee to keep it open and keep it where it's not controlled by a single company.
Even better.
Yeah, I think for enterprise Linux as a whole, that's going to be a better model long term.
Okay, let's be crazy now. Can we project what would happen 10 years from now? Do you think the standard will overtake Red Hat completely?
I hope it does, because I hope it becomes the standard. I think it's better for the industry as a whole. It's better for the users. It's better for the businesses that rely on enterprise Linux. It's better for the companies that write software for enterprise Linux to have a known standard that everyone can follow. It's better for choice for the consumer, because you might have a workload that Oracle Linux makes a lot of sense for you. It's very centralized IT-centric build. And you might have a workload that Rocky Linux is more for what you want to use. You should have that choice, but still have that compatibility. And I think for the users, for everyone, I think it's better for the software, the vendor, the distro builders. I think it's better for the folks that are upstream writing software, because if I'm writing something for Enterprise Linux as a software vendor, if I write it to the open ELA standards, it doesn't matter who builds it, it's going to work. And I'm not behind some sort of proprietary paywall that I'm worried about, will my software that I wrote even work, because I can't get into how the sausage is made as you would.
Really amazing. I'm really excited for that perspective anyway. If we have at heart the interest of the community, that's for me, like, I'm all for it, because, it's destined to protect the end users above all, which is super nice. Yeah. Love it. Now let's talk about you, Erik. Where can people find you, and what advice would you give to junior folks that are interested to join the force of Linux? Sorry.
No worries. I'm really easy to find. I blog at talesinthedatacenter.com. That's my production blog that I use, and that's the easy way to find me online. I'm on Twitter. I'm Erik Benner at Twitter. I'm on LinkedIn as Erik Benner, ErikBenner. So I'm pretty easy to find. If you have a question, the easiest thing is to go to my blog, Tales from the Data Center, and you can type in the question there. As far as if you're getting new in IT, I think one of my favorite blog posts, if you're going to get started in IT, don't be afraid to specialize in an area, but at the same time, be a generalist. Learn more technologies than just one thing. Don't go into IT and just be a Java developer, or just be a Linux admin, or just be a DBA. Learn skills across the entire landscape of IT. It's a little harder, so you're going to start small, but always grow and expand that skill set.
Right on, man. Wow. This was an amazing experience. Thanks so much, Erik, for taking part in this discussion and your patience. I learned so much in these 2 episodes, and I'm 100% sure that all the listeners will too. That, my friend, was a blast. Cheers, Erik. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
All right. On this note, we've reached the end of the second part of the open source debate. Special thanks to our amazing guest, Erik Benner, and big ups to you, dear listeners, for sticking with us. Your support means everything, so please share and hit subscribe on Spotify to stay tuned, people. You're listening to Tech Beats Unplugged, and I'm your host, Cloud Dude, and we got more for you in the next episode. Until then, keep grooving, baby. Signing out.